I believe he's going to get more money than Ohtani. Now, not more than 700. I believe he's going to beat his present day value, which was 460, right? The Ohtani deal with the deferrals factored in, present day value 460. Do I believe Juan Soto will get more than that? AJ, I will bet you right now that he gets more than that.
Well, here is a media member. Ken, do media members remind players about records?
No. That would have to come, I would think, from the PR people. It's not like we're in the clubhouses saying, hey, you're 3 home runs away from X. I can't recall that ever happening. Now,
lie. That's a blatant lie. Right
wait
there.
a minute.
That is a blatant lie. Maybe it's not
Go.
because I went up to Jose Altuve before he got 2,000. He was like 10 away, and I go, "How long do you think it'll take to get your, the number?" And he goes, "I don't know. What am I 10 away?" And I'm like, "I think so." And he's like, give me 4
Well, AJ,
games
you're
or
a
something.
very unusual media member then. I'm not sitting there talking to guys and saying, hey, you're like 6 away. Now, I will say this. I did ask Altuve recently about 3,000 and basically just the idea of him getting there. Could he do it? That kind of thing. But I personally, I'll just speak only for myself since I didn't cover the AJ Przinsky wing of the media. I will say that I have never told a player or even asked a player, hey, man, you're 3 away from this, informing him of that milestone. That doesn't happen. When I covered Cal Ripken and he's marching toward Lou Gehrig, we kind of all knew the numbers, but it's not as if he needed to be reminded of that.
Ken, by the way, speaking of the AJ Przinsky wing of the media, I heard on Saturday my request finally came through. They didn't get to you like the whole game, and I was like, "Thank you, Mr. Colucci."
It's not exactly how it went, AJ. We had some technical difficulties. We had some technical difficulties that I'd rather not expound upon right now. Actually,
Okay.
I couldn't expound upon them because I didn't really know what happened, but we were having some issues. Let's put it that way. We were all
So
silenced.
I text Karos and I go, "That's your best home run call of all time on the Marte home run." It was great.
Man.
Oh,
Now, what AJ's talking about, for those who might not be aware of this, on the FS1 broadcast Saturday, we lost audio for pretty good portions of the broadcast, first 3 innings or so, and then on the Marte home run. So it was like a silent movie for a time, and actually some people might have enjoyed that.
Yeah, you let it breathe. You really took it to the next level. Let it breathe. Okay.
You could hear
we'll
the
let it breathe.
crowd. You could hear crowd noise, but you couldn't hear the announcers.
I like that, just to switch things up. Some people want a feed available where they can at some times just hear the game, just what it sounds like in the ballpark. So maybe that'll happen at some point. Let's get to the game. So I want to point out a team that we haven't covered a ton in the first few weeks because they've just been kind of cruising through in the 500 range, but then they got hot. So they're 13-10. It's the Toronto Blue Jays. Dalton Varsho's on a little home run binge lately and playing sick defense. Last year, they were labeled the Paper Tigers by everyone's favorite FT Senior Insider. Do you think that they might be able to escape that moniker this year, Ken?
Well, I'd like to see it happen, for sure. They're a talented team. They're a fun team to watch, but they've got to do it at crunch time, right? In the pennant race, in the stretch drive, and then in the postseason. We have not seen that from this group. They're fully capable of it. And the starting pitching is pretty amazing, top shelf. And they have offensive players who are extremely talented, Varsho being one of them. Now, what's interesting is last year, when Gurriel Jr. was doing so well with the Diamondbacks, and of course Gabriel Moreno, and Varsho was struggling, people were quick to condemn that trade from the Blue Jays' perspective. And yet, if you're around the game enough, you guys know this, fans know this too. Things don't always evolve over 1 year. Sometimes it takes multiple years for really a fan or a media member or a team to get a full picture. Dalton Varsho was a really good player with the Diamondbacks. The Jays wanted him for a reason. They gave up those 2 players they did for a reason. And now, after what was a problematic year for him, no question, in 2023, he is showing the kind of ability the Jays knew he had. And it's not just defensive, where it's always brilliant, but on the offensive side as well. And I was just reading about him, and Yusei Kikuchi had a pretty good quote about Varsho saying, the entire team roots for him. Guy works really hard behind the scenes. You can see him on the plane watching video. So it's good to see him have success. It's good to see this trade now working out seemingly for both teams.
I love Dalton Varsho, and I've played the fiddle for him, telling everybody, relax. He's a great base runner, defender. his hitting will come. But you said they're the paper tigers because of the meat of that order. Can the meat of this order carry this team to the playoffs and actually help this pitching staff that was one of the best consistent pitching staffs, all of them making their starts except for Manoah last year?
Well, I called them the Paper Tigers, Eric, because they are a team as a whole that did not play to its potential. That's why last year I labeled them that in September. And we will see as the season goes on if they are capable of taking the next step. And we've seen many times in the past, not just in baseball, in all sports, teams kind of evolve. And sometimes they do follow somewhat of a linear progression where they're not quite there yet, they're getting closer, and then suddenly they develop into the team that on paper they should be. We see it happen sometimes faster with clubs than others. Now, the Orioles right now, the way they're playing, there's no waiting involved. They're playing an extremely high level. They're not going to be paper tigers in my estimation. They are good. The Jays have that talent, maybe even more talent than the Orioles right now in terms of veteran accomplished players, and yet they haven't taken that next step. Maybe this is the year. We'll see. But I'm not totally ready to get on their bandwagon yet, if that's the right phrasing, because I want to see more. I want to see them in that division, which is a tough division, of course, do this the whole year and dominate the way they are capable of dominating at times.
The Mets team that started out essentially 0-6, if not for a blooper to break up a no-hitter. And you wrote about this team in an in-depth, I would call it circular article, meaning, wow, we should be excited about them, but you got to be careful of this. My question to you is, how and where are they going to find the rest of the innings for this rotation that has really propped up this team? I get it, Senga's coming back, but even when he comes back, he's a six-man rotation guy.
That's a great question, Eric. And that's really the biggest question I have with them. Now, clearly, they've lost Alvarez now for a time, 6 to 8 weeks, their catcher. He's an important player for them. They've lost Brooks Raley, who is also on the injured list, an important reliever for a bullpen that has been outstanding. But the principal question raised in that circular article, and you labeled it right, is can they find, as you mentioned, enough innings in that rotation? And it's a rotation comprised of guys who are not exactly workhorses. I'm talking about Quintana, who was hurt last year, was a workhorse at one point in his career, but really isn't at this point in his career, or can't be expected to be at 35. And the rest of that group as well, it's just talented. No question. Luis Severino, talented, hasn't thrown a lot of innings in recent years. Sean Manaea was largely in the bullpen last year. Adrian Hauser, I don't know how long he's even going to stay in the rotation. He had a rough go Sunday in Los Angeles. So yes, once Senga gets back, certainly that helps. But I do have questions about whether that group can sustain it. And ultimately, if they don't, if they are not giving the Mets enough innings, what happens? The bullpen wears down. That great strength that you have shown early in the season is not going to be that same kind of potent force. So we'll see. And at the deadline, maybe if they're in it, they go get a starter. But I've been talking to some people in the game last few days, last week or so. I don't know how many great players are going to be available at the deadline because so many teams are trying and so many teams see the expanded playoffs as an opportunity. So we'll see. That's a long ways away, of course. But the Mets, I will say this, and I wrote this, are at least more interesting than I ever thought they were going to be going back to spring training.
Well, the Mets are always interesting in the offseason. And there's a big player out that's going to be a free agent at the end of the offseason, Juan Soto, who's already in New York, proving so far, at least he can handle the pressure. But did you write that he's going to get more money than Ohtani? Because if he is, we might need to cut you off from whatever it is that you are talking about, Ken.
I believe he's going to get more money than Ohtani. Now, not more than 700. I believe he's going to beat his present day value, which was 460, right? The Ohtani deal with the deferrals factored in, present day value, 460. Do I believe Juan Soto will get more than that? AJ, I will bet you right now that he gets more than that.
What? I love that. Steak dinner.
What? Well, he will never pay up. So how can I beg
hey, you got to
that never pays?
I walked myself right into that. But yeah.
I mean, I don't understand. I can't make a
I'm pretty
bet, Krause,
confident
with
in
someone that
that.
never
AJ,
pays.
why don't you think he'll get 460?
Well, I just want to know what team's going to pay it.
Mets, Yankees, there are teams out
Yankees can afford a $50 million a year player.
there.
Yes.
The Yankees afford him? Yes, they can afford him. The Mets will have a lot more
The Yankees-
payroll flexibility at the end of this season, and I would expect for Juan Soto, you will see other teams enter the fray as well. It's Juan Soto, man. He's going to be 26 next season as a free agent going into the market. He's going to do really well. He turned down 440 for 15. He's going to do better than that, and he's going to do better than Ohtani's present day value.
Okay, all right.
Ken said it with his chest.
Ken's crazy too, but that's
I
fine.
love it. I love it.
Because he's going to have to get deferred money too, so it's going to change it. So I mean, if you can't,
No, he's
really
not.
say it like that.
He doesn't
You don't
have to
think
get
Juan
deferred
Soto-
money. He doesn't have to. He can
I'll
accept
also
a
make a
present
bet
day
on that.
value deal. I think a lot of people confused Ohtani's deal because they're like, it's 700 million. It's not 700 million present day value. That's not how the game looks at it, Ken. That's not how banks look at it. It's different.
Right.
I'm not the best at explaining it, but it's not the same.
That's right. And with Soto, AJ's right. He could get 600 with X amount deferred and still beat Ohtani's present day value. I don't know how it's going to work. I don't know the kind of deal he's going to sign, but the Mets will be in position to do that. The Yankees, they traded for him not with the idea of him being a one-year player. Now, it's going to cost a lot of money. Scott Boras is the agent. He's going to want full market value, and maybe the Yankees decide whatever that number is, they don't want to pay it, but they knew what they were getting into here. And that's why they went after him the way they did. And certainly to this point of the season, he has proven every bit of the player they wanted and envisioned him being.
Ken, I know in Fair Territory yesterday you covered a number of slow starters. Is there one that you can point out that you either think will definitely rebound or you're most concerned about of the list that you went over?
I would say I'm most concerned about Jose Abreu because his start has been just dismal, and he's the oldest of those players. He's 37. Goldschmidt last night had a better night, a single and a home run, and he finally looked a little bit more like Paul Goldschmidt in his final 2-3 at bats. So he is a guy, man, it's tough to count him out. He's had such an amazing career. He's come out of things before, of course, like all players have. But Abreu, that one, I just don't know where that's going, and that's a real concern. I also talked about Blake Snell, and I mentioned, of course, after about May 20th last year, he had a 1.20 ERA, so he certainly is capable of getting it going again. And then Kyle Hendricks with the Cubs, I don't know. He was encouraged by his last start, but the results still weren't good. He too is older. He's had an amazing career in his own right. But the sad thing about the game is guys don't sustain it forever. It's impossible. No one does that. And at some point, players do start to decline, and some decline rather markedly. That's why we kind of had this conversation yesterday. We'll see which guys come out of it, but if I had to bet, I'd bet on Goldschmidt and Snell.
So where do the Astros go? Where do the Astros go? Because the Astros are not 7 and I'm blanking now what they are. 7
19.
and 4, 7 and 19.
7 and 16. 7 and 16.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
Good. I'm glad we were both blanking. 7 and 16 because Jose Abreu. Where do they go? Where do they go from here?
Well, I'm not exactly sure. And they've got John Singleton, but I don't know that he's an everyday player. They've got a kid at AAA, Lo Profito, who's had some big numbers, but if you're injecting him into that mix, well, one, are you going to release Jose Abreu with a year plus left on his contract, which is paying almost $20 million a year? That's a big ask and something that Jim Crane has not done as an owner. Hasn't had to do it, but he hasn't done it. And then just as Verlander came back, Christian Javier goes on the injured list. So their pitching still isn't getting fully healthy as it will, hopefully, at some point this season. Remember, they've got McCullers still out, Urquidy still out, Luis Garcia still out as well. McCullers and Garcia later in the season, Urquidy hopefully at some point in the next few weeks. They've got to get the pitching straight, but they also have to hit. And that's the one thing here. While their pitching has struggled, they have not covered it offensively. Bregman has not been great so far, to say the least. And overall, their offense just hasn't clicked the way we've seen it click so many times in the past. Tough team to count out because of all they've accomplished and who is on that club, who's on that roster. We know the names. They've been in the postseason for 7 straight years, in the ALCS for 7 straight years. But it's a tough start for them. And 7-16 is not an inconsequential hole here. It's 9 games under 500. So they've got work to do. There's no question.
Ken, before Kratz asks you his next question, that's 3 bets you've made today. So which one will you pay up on? That's 3 that I've heard you make today. So
I only made 1 bet, Juan Soto.
No, you said you'd bet on Goldschmidt, Snell, and I forget what I already won the other one on.
I wasn't making an bet with you.
All right. Well, then here's the next bet that you need to make.
Question.
Yeah, here's the next bet you need to make. When AJ becomes a manager for the first time, are you going to give him a hard time in his first year? And comparing it to the first-year managers this year, who do you think is going to come out on top?
Well, Eric, I'll say this. If AJ becomes a manager, I might have to quit the day job and go find a beat writing job in that city just so I can be there every single day asking different questions.
Credential revoked. In those managers meetings you think you get in? Oh, I'll take everybody except for Junior. Junior can just stay outside.
But I'll tell you what, Eric, to get to a serious part of that question, I mentioned on Fair Territory yesterday that I've got kind of a built-in bias against first-year managers because I was scarred earlier in my career from covering Phil Regan, who's a great guy but didn't have a good run with the Orioles 1 year, and then Ray Miller, who was the manager after Davey Johnson, who had succeeded Regan. It's kind of an unfair bias because a lot of first-year managers have succeeded since then. And we're looking at 3 right now. Pat Murphy is 1 with Milwaukee. Stephen Vogt with Cleveland is another. And Carlos Mendoza with the New York Mets. Now, we don't know if these guys are all going to have their teams sustain what they've started with. But they've all been impressive in their own right so far. So, getting to the AJ question. As a first-year manager, if some team is bold enough to hire him, maybe his former team, the 3-19 team, if some team does that, I won't rip the hire that day. I'll wait to see how AJ does.
We could all hope that the White Sox hire this guy right there. We could
they just fired me. I ain't gonna be rehired all of a sudden.
to give you a
different
promotion.
job. AJ, I guess the question has to be asked on behalf of all White Sox fans. If asked, will you serve?
I mean, under what capacity?
As a manager.
Manager of the White Sox.
The way the team's constructed right now?
Yeah.
Yes.
That's why the job would be open, AJ, because of the way the team is constructed right now.
I'm not either, but I'm saying if they have a manager, but would I get some say in like some personnel decisions because of what's happening there? I mean, at 3-19, I don't know if you saw this or not, Ken, last night, but I called the game for Fox Sports 1. You probably didn't listen, but they did get shut out for the 8th time in 22 games, a Major League record. So we set a Major League record last night.
I did notice that. And again, maybe if you were the guy asked to be the manager, I don't know, maybe it would be different. Obviously, the problem is
it would definitely be different.
Roster. I want to make it
definitely
clear.
be different.
This is not on Pedro Grifol. I mean, to some degree,
100%.
of course
No
it
one's
is,
saying that.
but it's the team. And it's the team, years of construction, mismanagement that has led to this point. And it's a shame. We're also seeing some good players for the White Sox struggle in ways that I never even imagined. Andrew Vaughn, most notably among them. So it's a tough situation right now. And man, I don't know where it's going exactly. I cover the 0-21 Orioles. I talk about this a lot. 3-19 is pretty darn close to 0-21.
Yeah, this team is awful. Awful.
But they didn't get shut out 8 times in the first 22 games. The 0-21
No, they
Orioles
didn't. They didn't.
They could probably score some runs. They just couldn't stop anyone from scoring.
I'm voting for AJ or Ozzie.
Me and Ozzie? You can't have, what are we, a co-man?
No, AJ or Ozzie. I mean, you would bring a little bit of Ozzie into that clubhouse anyway. So just saying.
Ozzie's not happening. Ozzie or me is not happening.
All right. Yeah, we're keeping you anyway. We have AJ on a better deal. So, Ken, thank you. We'll catch you later this week. All right.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much. Fair Territory is out there if you want to check it out. Boom. Mondays and Thursdays. If you are listening right now to the pod, you should watch at some point and see this pretty little graphic that Derek put together behind the scenes. Thursday's show will have Ken and new addition to the FT fam, Alana Rizzo. I think this is our third or fourth show together, and that show is live every Thursday leading up to Foul Territory. It's at 12:30 Eastern Time.
Hey, everybody. Be sure to like and subscribe for more content.
We're back here every weekday, all year long, so do not miss an episode.
The videos are coming in all day. Here's another video you might enjoy.
Baseball the way it should be covered.